Now, I've made it no secret in plenty of my past videos that I'm not a huge fan of the direction Disney's gone in the past decade or so. But, as hard as this may seem to believe, there was a time not too long ago where it looked like Disney had gotten their groove back and was setting themselves up for another Disney renaissance. Now, I know that there are some out there who will argue that Disney has been in another golden age for the past decade, but a crucial difference here is that the Disney Renaissance was a return of form to Disney, where they regained the quality and style they had been known for under Walt Disney, with only a few alterations made to the formula in order to make their stories better for audiences of that time. To put it simply, the movies of the Disney Renaissance felt like Disney movies. The movies they've been releasing these days feel more like Disney trying to build themselves a new identity rather than trying to regain the one they had before. But the point is, before this happened, Disney was able to release a few movies that really managed to capture the old Disney magic. And if you ask me, there's probably no better example of this than Tangled. In fact, I might even go as far as to say that Tangled might just be the last real Disney masterpiece the company has made so far. But before I go any further, I would just like to warn you that there will be spoilers ahead, so if for whatever reason you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably click off the video and come back later. This is the only warning I will be giving. Okay, so to make one thing crystal clear first, I'm not saying that Tangled is the last good movie Disney has made. I'm simply saying that it's the last movie Disney's made so far that feels like a true Disney movie. In other words, it's the last movie that really feels like it belongs right alongside most of the other classics the company had made over their, at that point, 70-year history. Now, I know some might argue that a few of their later movies deserve this distinction as well, but I'll get back to that later. Because right now, I just want to focus on why Tangled itself is such a great Disney movie, and Disney princess movie in particular. Okay, so to start with the short version first, even outside of being a Disney movie, Tangled is frankly great. But taking into account that it is a Disney movie, and it's almost perfect. Though obviously it takes a lot of liberties with the source material, but let's face it, there really wasn't too much to the original story. And it's not like Disney has ever been a stranger to making extreme deviations from the stories they're adapting. But in this case, all of the changes serve the story perfectly. Giving Rapunzel magic hair with healing properties provides the perfect reason for both why she doesn't cut it and why Mother Gothel would want to keep her away from everybody so obsessively. And changing her to a princess not only fits the whole, Disney princess thing a lot better, but also makes it a lot more likely that she can find out Gothel isn't really her mother, as well as justify her obsession with the lanterns. And of course, there are other things I could bring up, but I think I've made my point here. And then there are the characters. And let me just save time by saying they nailed every single one of them. Whether it's the lead characters, the thugs who turn out to be much nicer than they appear, the villain, or the comic relief characters in Maximus and Pascal, they all serve their role in the story perfectly. But seriously, have you ever seen a more feisty chameleon or determined horse in your entire life? It's really no wonder why everybody loves these two. And this goes even more so for the leads. Flynn slash Eugene is the perfect lovable rogue with a bigger heart than he wants to admit, And the reveal that Flynn Rider isn't actually his real name was honestly a very interesting twist. I mean, it doesn't serve the larger story too much, but it makes perfect sense for his character, considering we already know him to be a wanted thief with a bit of an ego. In other words, even though it isn't really foreshadowed, it honestly makes complete sense that a man like him might be ashamed of his identity and want to forge a cooler one, which is why it works so well. And we also see that it's once he reveals this that he starts warming up to Rapunzel, which shows that he still has a lot more Eugene to him than Flynn, even after all of his years of thieving. But if we're talking about characters in this movie, then one that must be talked about is Mother Gothel. Though obviously not the greatest villain Disney's ever made, if you ask me, Gothel nonetheless clears the very high precedence set for her, and is definitely the last great villain the company has created after only King Candy himself. Because here's the thing. There's no complexity to her. No sad backstory, no sympathetic motivation. This woman just wants to stay young and beautiful forever, and plans to do that by any means necessary. And even if you prescribe to the theory that a fear of death is what motivates her actions, she still comes across as way too petty, superficial, and bratty to be sympathetic. Because even if that is partially what drives her, it's clear that her looks are her number one priority. And I think most can agree that she takes things way too far in service of that, especially with how unapologetic and remorseless she is. But what also helps is that she's a charismatic but very credible threat. Because when this woman goes on the warpath, she's terrifying. And let's face it, she comes uncomfortably close to winning the day when all's said and done. And just as a side note, that's another thing this movie does really well. When it wants to get serious, it gets serious. Like that scene right after Gothel takes Rapunzel away and Eugene is arrested while screaming her name, and Maximus just looks off into the distance with this huge look of concern on his face. At that moment, it feels as if Gothel has already won, and that Maximus is the only one with even a chance of doing something. Again, it's pretty tense for a kids movie, but it's brilliant. And that's not even getting into things like the climax, which also does a perfect job of being really tense, but I'm getting off topic here. So to get back to Gothel, in essence, she has all the marks of a great Disney villain. She's charismatic, smart, unsympathetic, a huge threat, and manages the delicate balance of being fun to watch while at the same time doing a great job of making the audience hate her. Oh, and not to mention, she's got one heck of a song. Sure, maybe Mother's Knows Best falls a little short in that department, but if her reprise in the forest doesn't get your blood pumping, I don't know what will. Seriously, that last part in particular is epic. Now I know some feel that Gothel was a little too much of a realistic abuser and should have been a bit more cartoonishly evil, but if you ask me in this particular case, it's not an issue. It would become an issue in later Disney movies, yes, but here I believe it was handled better. Besides, seeing what a huge ego this woman has, I wouldn't say it's illogical that putting down the woman she's basically forced to live with to boost herself is something she would do, even in an older Disney movie. And speaking of which, there's also the movie's main character, Rapunzel. And if you ask me, she may just be the best character in the entire movie. And let me just start by saying, Mandy Moore as Rapunzel might just be the greatest princess casting since Paige O'Hara as Belle, or maybe even Jodie Benson as Ariel. I mean, this woman's performance is absolutely spot on. And as for the character herself, she is the perfect embodiment of the Disney princess and would seamlessly fit in with the classic ones. She's a plucky ball of sunshine, a friend to all animals and people, and is just unapologetically fun and nice to a fault. Sure, she can be a bit insecure or feisty at times, but everybody has their moments. Basically, I feel a major reason why Rapunzel works so well is because she feels like she belongs in a fairy tale. And on that topic, that's why I in turn believe the movie as a whole works so well. Because it's being like an older Disney movie and simply adapting a fairy tale rather than trying to give a modern commentary on them like some of their later movies did. There's no complexity or maturity here that would go right over the heads of children. It's clearly a movie that was made for them, even if it has its darker moments, just like older Disney films. The director even said that the movie started out as an Enchanted style parody, but then they decided they needed to take a step back and realized that they shouldn't be afraid or ashamed of doing fairy tales. And if you ask me, that was a major benefit to the movie. Because apart from modernizing it slightly, it stays exactly true to the style of fairy tales of old, just like the Disney Renaissance did. Sure, there is some modern style humor, and Rapunzel isn't a damsel in distress, saving Flynn as often as he saves her. But in the end, the movie is still unapologetically a fairy tale, and most importantly, feels like one. Again, Rapunzel is a plucky girl and complete social butterfly despite her upbringing. Almost everybody turns out to be a better person than they appear. Rapunzel and Eugene are allowed to fall in love at a fairy tale pace. And finally, love, with a little magic, is enough to bring the dead back to life. And that's one thing particularly I like about the movie. It's not afraid to have Rapunzel and Eugene fall in love and depict it as undeniably true love after only knowing each other for a few days. Instead of going through this whole song and dance about how you can't love and marry somebody you just met, the movie simply gets around sending a bad message by having Eugene say in the epilogue that it was years before they actually got married. And if you ask me, that was the perfect way to handle that. To let their romance be depicted as true love even after a short period of time, but offhandedly mention that they weren't impulsive about it. Stays completely true to the spirit of fairy tales, while also not encouraging questionable decisions. And, of course, there is also that their romance does have a bit more substance than what fairy tales are usually known for, but again, there's absolutely no problem with that. If anything, it makes the whole thing even better in a case like this. Alright, so my point here is Tangled is not just a great movie, but does a perfect job of taking everything Disney was known for and bringing it into the modern age. It keeps the changes from the fairy tale style to a minimum, and the result is a Disney classic that easily belongs alongside the other classic Disney princess and even non-Disney princess movies. Heck, even its minor flaws are in keeping with the Disney movies of old. That's how on the nose it is. It's only a shame they didn't keep going in that direction afterwards. And to bring up something I mentioned at the beginning, let's go over a few of their next movies so I can demonstrate why I said that Tangled might just be the last classic, in terms of Disney at least, among them. Now, first off, I'm not counting the 2011 movie Winnie the Pooh, as Winnie the Pooh always had a style all its own, as well as the fact that plenty of adults probably wouldn't even entertain it. But in the end, yes, it does very much stay true to the spirit of Winnie the Pooh, and the only reason I'm not giving it more credit here is because so many overlook it. But perhaps I'll get more into this movie in a separate video if you guys are interested. But skipping over that one for now, as far as Wreck-It Ralph goes, pretty much everyone, myself included, love this movie, with some even going as far as to call it a masterpiece. And again, I most definitely agree with that. The one problem, however, is that it feels more like a Pixar movie than a Disney movie, to the point that I remember many at the time being surprised to learn that it wasn't a Pixar movie. So my point is, while an excellent movie, it isn't entirely Disney and feels more at home in Pixar's gallery. And keeping in mind that's what we're looking at here, what movies feel the most Disney rather than how great they actually are. And in the case of Wreck-It Ralph, no matter how good it is, it still doesn't feel like a Disney movie, especially when compared to Tangled. Now I know there's some that might argue that it does feel like a Disney movie, and I will concede that an argument could be made for that. But again, even then, it can't reach the levels of Tangled in that department. Now as for Frozen, I did a whole separate video on that, which you can find a link in the description to. But to summarize it here, Frozen is much more deconstruction of Disney movies, which, while making for a good movie, almost makes it feel like an anti-Disney movie as a result. And this would only continue to the company's detriment in later movies. Big Hero 6 honestly feels like something out of DreamWorks or Pixar than Disney. Zootopia is way too serious and realistic to feel like classic Disney, and Moana is where things get complicated. Because it feels like the writers were going back and forth on whether or not they wanted to make it a straight fairy tale like Tangled or a deconstruction of them like Frozen, and just couldn't make up their minds. And the result is this weird jumble of deconstructing Disney stuff while at the same time playing it straight, which is why I believe some find it hard to take this movie seriously, because it can't make up its mind on what it wants to be. To put it simply, Tangled commits to being a fairy tale. Moana, on the other hand, can't decide whether it wants to play it straight or not. And the result is a movie that feels like both an ode and takedown of older Disney movies at the same time. Then we got two sequels that didn't feel anything like Disney movies, an absolute mess that tried to do more deconstructing, and another good movie that nonetheless felt more at home with Pixar and got way too serious with its themes. Alright, so to sum it all up, while the Disney company has definitely made its fair share of great movies in the past decade, I believe that Tangled is the last real and true Disney movie they've made so far. Now, if you disagree with that assessment, I'm perfectly okay with that. You are just as entitled to your opinion on this as I am to mine. And I know there are also some who feel that a few of their movies that came afterwards are true Disney movies as well. And again, if you do believe that, it's most certainly your prerogative to do so. But for the reasons I've listed in this video, I feel it really stopped at Tangled. And honestly, I think that's a bit of a shame. Because Tangled was a great movie, and honestly a really good way to modernize a fairy tale while also keeping it timeless and in the spirit of what they were always known for. So it's just a bit sad that they didn't make more movies following that format. Though, as I've said many times before, it's always possible that Disney will see where they've been going wrong and get back on track at some point, but only time will tell. Because the thing is, I don't enjoy making all these videos explaining where Disney and Pixar are messing up. But to speak the plain truth, I want them to succeed. I am really a big fan of theirs. And the way I see it, the only way they're ever going to learn is if somebody, even if it's just me, a random no-name YouTuber tries to point it out to them where they've been going wrong. Not that I expect anybody associated with Disney will ever watch this or any of my other videos in a million years, but I still feel I have to try anyway. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there before I ramble on any further. So now I'd like to hear your opinions. Do you believe Tangled is the last tried and true Disney movie the company has made to date? Or do you believe they've made plenty of other movies that feel just as home with their classic movies and that I don't know what I'm talking about? Please let me know what you think in the comments. And as I said before, if you disagree with me, I'm perfectly fine with that. I simply wanted to share what I personally felt in this video, nothing more. And thank you all for watching. It is all greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.